All right. Welcome to LIBOR's Wednesday webinar. My name is Mark Donnelly, and I am your 2024 president-elect. I am very excited to introduce our presenter, Matt Christofferson, who will be presenting on the state of real estate firms today. Matt Christofferson is the director of, well, first of all, hi, Matt. Thanks for being here today. Matt is the Director of Business and Consumer Research at the National Association of Realtors in Washington, D.C. And I have had the pleasure of working alongside Matt and his team as the immediate past chair of NAR's Research Committee. So not only introducing Matt as a colleague, but as a friend. And thank you so much for being here for our brokers in our amazing association. In his role, Matt conducts member and consumer survey research where he contributes to the profile of home buyers and sellers and member profile flagship reports and researches topics including real estate firms, international buyers, marijuana and real estate, and more. Matt earned his Bachelor of Science in Marketing and Global Supply Chain from the University of South Carolina and is currently earning a Master's in Marketing Research and Analytics degree at Michigan State University. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Mark, and thanks for having me. I am going to share this. Let's see. Okay. Well, thanks for having me, everyone. Like Mark said, I've worked with him closely on the research committee, and we'll get to that in just a second. But thank you for having me. Today, we're going to be talking about real estate firms across the US. Before I get started, we did make these slides to be shared with you all. So every slide has a link to the source of that data to make it very easy to reference for you all. Also, please feel free to pop any questions you have into the Q&A section. I find it much more useful to answer them throughout rather than waiting till the end for everything. So feel free to put any questions there. But let's talk about real estate firms. So before we talk about the firms, we're going to talk about a little bit about the current market and how we got here. So here we're looking at, on a monthly basis, year-over-year percent changes in existing home sales. So you can over the past few years, you can see three distinct periods. So before COVID hit, it was a much calmer market. There weren't any dramatic swings in sales activity. But obviously, once COVID occurred, we had stay-at-home orders. We weren't generally able to meet in person. So obviously, there was a halt in sales. But once real estate was deemed an essential business, yes, we had historically low mortgage rates, but we also had a lot of changes in buyer behavior and buyer preferences. So your buyers might have been looking for another room for their newly found remote work for a home office. They may be looking for another room for homeschooling, for a virtual schooling. They may simply be looking for more outdoor space and space to be close with, spend time with family and friends. That's the number one driver of buyers. But also during this period, we had an onslaught of a lot of new agents to the field. They saw the opportunity that existed within real estate and they decided to capitalize on it. So we had a lot of new, inexperienced agents enter the field during this period. As you can see, then suddenly we started running out of inventory. There was nothing to buy or sell. And there have been years of underproduction of housing. So there simply aren't enough properties there to satisfy the demand that there is. And then finally, over the past year and a half or so, we've seen that impact of higher mortgage rates, which were an effect of efforts to calm inflation, and then also from that low supply. There simply are less homes to be bought or sold. More recently, very recently, we've seen an impact from lowered mortgage rates. We just released our pending home sales on Friday, which is more forward-looking, and we had an 8% increase from the prior month. So we're expecting definitely some recovery in sales activity over the coming months. What does that mean for home sales? So here we're looking at quarterly home sale price, and you can see the year-over-year change. So with the remaining demand in buyers, along with low activity, it's keeping those prices high and even increasing. You can see in late 2021, we had prices rising 24% from the previous year. So it's really been benefiting those already in homes, where they can build up their equity, build up their wealth, and use that as they see fit. We just closed out 2023. The overall median sales price for the year was just under 400,000, and that's at a national level. So like I said, really benefiting those already in homes. It still remains a competitive environment. This is on a monthly basis asking realtors, how many offers did you receive on your most recently sold home? You can see in 2022, this peaked at 5.5 offers on just your typical sold home. And it really calmed down as activity calmed down. But even this past month, just your typical sold home received 2.4 offers. So it remains competitive, and I'm expecting this figure to increase in the coming months as well. Obviously, when you're competing against multiple offers on a home that you want, an easy way to have the winning bid is to pay in all cash if you're able to. We've been seeing all cash buyers remain very high. Even in the past month in December, almost 1 in 3 buyers paid in all cash, which is wild. A lot of them are, yes, there's a portion of them that are investors and institutional investors, but there's a lot of repeat buyers that have benefited from that last chart I showed you, where they've really built up additional equity and wealth to use this for their next purchase. So another way that those repeat buyers and those already in homes have benefited, but the group that has not exactly benefited from this market are first-time buyers. So here we're looking on an annual basis. This is from our profile of home buyers and sellers, the percentage of buyers that are buying for the first time. You can see that this peaked in 2010 at 50% of buyers, and this was with the introduction of the first-time homebuyer tax credit. It's generally decreased over the years as affordability has declined, and we saw a historic low of first-time buyers in 2022 at 26%. We saw some recovery last year, which is great, but there's still a ways to go. It's taking people a long time to be able to build up their financials and be able to compete and enter into this home buying market. And at the same time, the role of agents remains essential. There's plenty of talk about other alternatives like iBuyer programs, that make it sound like it's just a point and click transaction. But we know that both buyers in the blue and sellers in the pink really value and use realtors in the transaction. Not only do they use them and want them, but they want a full service agent. They don't want someone to simply list their home on the MLS and call it a day. They're looking for someone to guide them through the process, understand it, understand paperwork, and negotiate the best price and do it in an efficient amount of time. So they really remain essential. And this brings us to our research priority. I don't know why this is not showing up on the screen, but our latest figure, I know we have about 1.58 million members. We know a lot about them from our member profile. We know our typical member is a 60-year-old college-educated female with 11 years of experience. And we also know that these members work in over 100,000 firms across the nation. So they have different markets, different sizes of firms, different priorities and specialties. And so that's what leads us to our sorry about that. That leads us to our profile of real estate firms. This survey was conducted, sent out online this past summer. Mark mentioned he was the chair last year of our NAR research committee, and we worked with the committee to look at the survey and make sure that it's updated and collecting useful and relevant information that you all can actually use. So your input is very much valued. If you see anything in this today that you think, hey, that you guys should change this for the next iteration, please let me know because your input is valuable. We sent the survey to brokers of record around the country, and each of them provided responses for their firm as a whole. We received over almost 5,900 responses, so we have a really strong data set. And we look at characteristics of firms, their business activities, tools and benefits that are provided to agents, and then their future outlook. And as you'll see, we have almost everything broken down, not only between residential and commercial firms, but also by size of the firm, so that you can compare yourselves to peers of similar size and nature. And who are brokers of record? Exactly, brokers of record are a broker that's responsible for at least one or more agents representing buyers or sellers, you all. We have at the time of this report, we had about 1.57 million members, and over 200,000 of the members are brokers of record, so they make up almost 13% of the overall NAR membership. So just before we get started, just wanted to check if there's any questions so far. Doesn't look like it. But again, remember, put any questions you have in the Q&A. But let's look at some characteristics of these firms. So we know the typical real estate firm has just one single office. Here's where there's sometimes some confusion with this report. We know that the typical member works at a large franchised office, a large franchise company, and that's because each of those companies employs a lot of members. So it's a high percentage of members. That's when you're treating each member as an individual. Here, we're looking at each firm as an individual. So on that, we know that the typical firm, 81% of them have just one single office. And on the right side, you can see that it's even more common for commercial firms than residential to have just one single office. What about type of firm? So of brokerage. So the large majority, 4 and 5 brokerages are traditional style setup. As you can see, as you go up in size and up in the chart, it's more likely for those larger brokerages to have a non-traditional hybrid or team setup type of brokerage. Also the firm type, I mentioned how the typical member works at a large franchise firm, but the typical firm, because there are so many of them, is an independent non-franchised company. That's at 86%, and 12% are independent franchise companies. Again, on the right side, you can see how that changes as they grow larger. The larger brokerages are more likely franchised. And here we have that broken down also between residential and commercial. It's even more common among commercial firms to be independent and non-franchised. Staff at firms also, so we know the typical firm is just a single office, it's independent, non-franchised. They also only have 3 full-time licensees. So that's your median sized, your typical firm. You can see how, as you look to the right, that's much larger. Among brokerages with 4 or more offices, they typically have 75 full-time licensees. So it really varies a lot. But the large majority are just those 3 people in a single office. Firms are largely not new to the field. I mentioned how we have a lot of newer agents to the field, but firm-wise, the typical firm has been in real estate for 18 years. It's even longer among commercial firms at 25 years compared to residential firms at 16. There's a lot of institutional knowledge at play, which is great. Legal organization, there's a little bit more variety here. The most common legal setup of a firm is an LLC at 38%. That's followed by S corps at 28% and sole proprietorships at 24%. Referral departments. So there's been a ton of movement within the nation, whether it's within a state to state, regionally, over the past several years, because of all those reasons I gave you. But a lot of people mainly are moving closer to friends and family. Um, it could also just be simply for better economic opportunity. But if you're not using a referral system, you're kind of leaving money on the table. We have research, there's plenty of sources available to see where people are moving from to your area and where your area people are moving to. It's very smart to use that data and set up a referral system where you can make sure that you're generating more business with this, but also keeping those clients happy. However, only 12% of firms overall have a referral department, and the typical referral department has just 2 people. As you can see, those larger firms, it's much more common. Firms with 4 or more offices, almost half of them, 45%, have a referral department. So that's definitely something to consider if you do not already have this. And geographic areas. So obviously these vary a lot depending on where you are, but also your size and your business strategy. The most common at 38% are covering a metropolitan area or region. 26% are covering a rural area or small town, and 18%, almost a fifth of firms are covering multiple metro areas or regions. Just checking if there's any questions before we look at business activities. Okay. So here in business activity, the headline of this report for business activity is that firms achieved more sales dollar volume with fewer number of sales. Just to point out, we conduct this report every 2 years, and all the full year financials like this are talking about 2022 because 2023 had not concluded at the time of the study. So we're comparing 2020 and 22. So you can see the typical residential firm brought in 7.8 million in sales volume, and that's up from 6.6. Similarly, commercial firms brought in typically 5.3 million, and that's up from 4.3. On the right side, you can see that broken down by the size of the firm. So those single office firms, again, the majority, brought in about 5.3 million, but those large firms with 4 or more offices brought in a median of $154.6 million. And like I said, that was with fewer sales. With that plays into the rising prices of property. They're able to sell fewer homes, or able is a strong word. They did sell fewer properties, but at a higher price point, and that's where they have higher sales volume. But the typical residential firm had 24 transaction sides, down from 27. Commercial firms, it was a little more stable over the past several years. The typical commercial firm had 9 transaction sides compared to 8 in 2020. Leasing sides is something that we added this year. This is obviously less common with residential firms, so their median is just 0, whereas the typical commercial firm had 4 leasing sides as well in 2022. So ancillary services are something to consider as well. I mentioned how both buyers and sellers are looking for a full service agent. They're not just looking for someone to simply post their home on the MLS, maybe post it on social media and call it a day. They're looking for people to really guide them through the entire process. And that includes additional services like this. As you can see, it's not only offered in-house. A lot of them are offered through a relationship with a vendor or an outside partner. What this does is allow you to compete with other brokerages to offer a more well-rounded service offering, which obviously helps you compete, but also keeps those clients happy. It's what they're looking for. It's meeting them where they're at. As far as what's offered in-house, the most common services are business brokerage, commercial consulting services, relocation services, and staging services. We know from our studies that staging is shown to bring a higher sales price. So like I said, this doesn't only make you more competitive, it can also bring additional money in. Here we're looking at the amount of the net revenue that these additional services bring in. And across all firms, almost a third, or actually like a little more than a third, say that these additional services make up almost 10% of their overall revenue. So makes you more competitive, but also brings in more money at the same time. Let's see, I think we might. Philip, I'm seeing your question. He asked, are there any stats for those agents that decide to move to another office? Do they go with another independent or franchise? That's a great question. And the research committee of 2024, we're going to be working on our report, which is called Career Choices in Real Estate. I can share that link with you. It's been a couple years since we last conducted that study, but we'll be conducting that again this year. And it's looking at not only why people choose real estate, but why they make decisions on their specialty, their brokerage, things like that, and why they may switch. So that's something that we can that you can look out for later this year, actually. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Let's see. I don't see legal or attorney as a category on the previous graph. I'm not sure which chart you're referencing. Maybe this one. I think some of that might fall under business brokerage or commercial consulting. But this is also something, again, where your input is super valuable. This is something that we can add for the next iteration as well. So thank you for that. Okay, so now we'll look at what firms provide to their agents and staff. So here we're looking at benefits that are specifically paid for by the firms. In the report, we have it broken down by other categories, like things are offered, but the agent pays for it. They may get it in other methods, but these are specifically what is paid for by the firm. And we have it broken down by what's offered to independent contractors, which we know most of our members are, salaried agents, and administrative staff and senior management. So across all four categories, the most common benefit that's provided by brokerages are E&O or liability insurance. You can see the salaried agents, staff, and management that are more likely to have things like vacation days. And staff and management are more likely to have health insurance paid for, but even then, it's only around 10% that receive this paid for by the firm. But these are great charts to look at to see how what you're offering compares to people similar to you. Hack tools are also super important. This is not only for your agents to be able to compete with other agents and create or offer a competitive offering, but it's also to meet those clients where they're at and meet them with the tools they expect to use and how they expect to communicate with you and have an efficient tech-enabled process. We know that from the profile of home buyers and sellers, we measure how many buyers use the internet at some point in the process. And we've seen that generally rise over the years, where this past year, 100% of buyers said that they use the internet at some point in the process. Now, also, I pointed out how agents are still essential. That's where you see this intersect of agents and technology. So these are tools that are provided or encouraged by firms to their agents. The most common are e-signature, comparative market analysis, multiple listing, and electronic contracts. So it's obviously essential to understand your market, understand comps, what others are selling for, and what people are looking for as buyers. But also things like e-signature and electronic contracts obviously have grown in popularity over the past several years, especially with COVID, when you maybe couldn't meet in person at every step of the way. But also with this competitive environment, these really allow you to stay on top of it, keep the process moving, and win that negotiation more quickly and more efficiently. But these are things to consider if you don't already offering to your agents, or at least educating them on so that they're more equipped in their jobs. Social media has also been a popular topic. Um, we know agents and realtors use social media all the time. We know the top platforms that they use are Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, at least for professional use. So firms sometimes have guidelines on what's acceptable for posting on social media, um, as they're often representing their brokerage in public. Only 5% of firms have guidelines around just personal accounts, but 22% have guidelines around professional accounts, and 35% have guidelines around both personal and professional. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they have an A to Z list of what's okay and not okay to post. This can be very simple guidelines of simply how to conduct yourself on social media as you're representing your brokerage. Virtual offices and assistants. So a virtual office is essentially a remote work office. They don't have a physical fixed location, and the employees and agents can work from anywhere. 25% of firms pretty much across the board have a virtual office component or option. Virtual assistants are also a way to pool resources, make kind of take a little bit of work off of admin for agents, and allow them to work more efficiently. But only 8% of firms offer this as an option and a tool. Teams as well are another way to pool resources, especially under those like just to pool resources and have marketing and other tasks work together. Only 12% of firms have real estate teams. And the typical real estate team is just 3 people, so they really don't need to be an army of people to form. But again, you could see how this is more common among those larger firms. They have more people and more opportunity to set up these team style formats. Also, with the onslaught of all of these new agents into the field, there's more agents and less homes to sell. So there's more competition even amongst agents, which I know we've all seen. And there are certain ways to differentiate your agents from others. And it's often with these opportunities. So we ask firms if they encourage their agents to pursue these opportunities. And more than 3/4 encourage their agents to pursue certifications and designations. There's a lot offered by NAR. They cover seemingly every topic that you could be interested in and want to pursue, depending on your client base that you're going after, your market, what people need and what people want. You can say, hey, compared to me or compared to these other agents, I'm educated and trained specifically to work with seniors, with veterans, with international buyers. Anything to set yourself apart is a great idea. I know Mark Donnelly has essentially the entire alphabet after his name. He's definitely pursued these, but it's great to see that firms are encouraging their agents to pursue these. Past that, 22% also encourage completing a higher education degree, and 62% encourage taking additional training classes. So definitely things to encourage maybe reward and at least encourage your agents to pursue. Let's see. Okay. So now we'll look forward at their future outlook. Excuse me. So again, this was done in 2023. So in 2023, we saw that 40% of firms were actively recruiting. You can see that that varies a lot by size of firm, where single office firms, just 34% were recruiting, but 87% of those largest brokerages were actively recruiting. It's also was more common among residential firms at 45% compared to commercial firms at 28%. Why were they recruiting? Primarily for growth in their primary business, which is great. That's an obvious way to recruit. They're also recruiting more experienced agents. So I keep mentioning this onslaught of new agents, and that's definitely something that plays into brokerages and their management. They're looking for more experienced agents that have dealt with more situations that buyers are dealing with, but also keeping that institutional knowledge within their firm and their workforce. Some secondary reasons are expanding diversity of agents. It's great to bring in new mindsets, new backgrounds, and new experiences to work with different types of clients and relate to them and understand them better. Expanding into new markets and also replacing agents leaving the firm. Here is where firms are expecting competition to come from looking forward. So the main sources where they're expecting increases in competition are virtual firms and non-traditional market participants. They're largely expecting competition to stay the same from those traditional brick and mortar large and single office firms and also from FSBOs. So keeping an eye on those, keeping those on their radar, but they're really keeping their concerns, building their strategy, making moves based on competition and being able to compete with virtual firms and those non-traditional market participants. Also looking forward, we asked firms, what are the biggest challenges you anticipate facing in the next 2 years? The number one cited was housing affordability. No surprise there. We all know that's a large issue in the market. It's helping a bit more recently with the lower mortgage rates, but those home prices are really not going down, though they will likely stay the same or even increase more with more buyer activity this year. Along with that, the second most common challenge is maintaining sufficient inventory. We need more housing. We need to build more housing and or find opportunities to create more housing. There simply isn't enough to satisfy the demand. Also, keeping up with technology. There are constantly new tech tools, and ones that really are there to make your lives and your jobs easier. They can help you compete, like I've said, with other brokerages, but it's also really important to stay up to date on them to meet clients where they're at, understand what tools they're looking to use, how they're expecting to view listings, how they're expecting to communicate with you. It's essential. After that, profitability, rising costs of the industry. I know I've heard a lot of members reference concerns over insurance costs and availability. So that's something that we'll be looking at this year as well. And also local or regional economic conditions. And finally, we ask firms, what's your prediction? What generational effects do you expect to impact the industry the most in the next 2 years? The most common was young adults' ability to buy a home. Are they able? That's largely what we're seeing in those first-time buyer numbers. It's still quite low. Young adults, they're dealing with obviously rising prices without that home equity to work with. Relatively stagnant wages and a lot of student debt that they're still dealing with. And and at the meantime, dealing with higher rents until they're able to buy. Following that, it's young adults' view of home ownership, the idea of a renter generation. Do young adults see the value of home ownership? Do they see that it's worth the sacrifices to get into the game, build up a competitive offer, and really get into home ownership? Or are they simply going to continue renting? And also, baby boomers retiring from real estate as a profession, how to not only replace them as a workforce, but also keep and maintain and grow that institutional knowledge that could be leaving with those boomers that are leaving the firm. So it was a lot of information. Like I said, we'll share this with everyone. I'm happy to answer any questions you have right now. But also wanted to share this QR code. I highly recommend following our research specific social media channels. We update them at least once a day. And that's where you'll see any new releases of new research data to stay up to date, and any uses of our research as well. But like I said, please let me know if you have any questions now as well.
It doesn't look like we have anything else coming in the chat. Like Matt said, if you guys have any last minute questions before we hop off, I'm sure Matt would be happy to answer them. But otherwise, this is a great presentation. I want to thank you for coming on today. Sure
Thanks.
everyone will really enjoy this, and this will be on lirealtor.com sometime this week under the broker risk management section. Let me just get a link for that so everyone can see it. We also have Patrick's webinar from last week on there. So that's the link if anyone wants to go check this out later. Seems like everyone's just very happy to have that information. So thanks again, Matt.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your week.